Dracula. The very name sends a chill through the centuries. A creature of the night, a symbol of fear, a legend born from darkness. But what if I told you that Dracula was real? Not a vampire from the grave, but a man of flesh and blood. A ruler who fought invaders, defied empires, and inspired one of the most enduring myths in human history. Before he was the Prince of Darkness, he was a Prince of Wallachia, a land caught between powers, faith, and survival. This is the real story behind the Dracula legend, the story of Vlad, the man history could not forget. Centuries ago, long before Gothic novels or Hollywood myths, there was a land caught between two great powers, the mighty Ottoman Empire to the south and the Kingdom of Hungary to the west. Its people called it the Romanian land, known to the world as Wallachia. It was no empire, but a proud principality, a frontier of freedom surrounded by giants. A land of dark forests and towering mountains, where travelers whispered that even the night itself had a soul. And in this land, in the 15th century, a young prince was born. His name was Vlad. He would rise to become one of the most feared and misunderstood rulers in all of Europe. A man whose life of power, war, and vengeance would ignite a legend that still refuses to die. To understand why Vlad became known as Dracula, we must begin with his father, Vlad Dracula. Dracula didn't mean devil at first. It came from the word Draco, Latin for dragon. Vlad's father was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a knightly order sworn to defend Christianity against the rising power of the Ottoman Turks. So, his son became known as Dracula, literally, the son of the dragon. But in time, as the centuries passed, the meaning twisted. The dragon became the devil, and the prince became a monster. Vlad was no ordinary ruler. He grew up in a world where betrayal was survival, and mercy was weakness. As a young boy, he and his brother were taken as hostages by the Ottoman Empire, pawns in a political game to ensure his father's loyalty. Imagine being a child, raised in enemy hands, never knowing if your family was still alive, your home still yours. In that world of cruelty and fear, Vlad learned what power really meant. He studied his enemies. He learned their language, their tactics, and their ruthlessness. And when he finally returned to Wallachia, he brought with him not just the scars of captivity, but the determination to never be controlled again. When Vlad took the throne, his country was broken. Corruption rotted the noble class. Enemies conspired inside his own walls, and the Ottoman Turks demanded tribute, gold, soldiers, and submission. But Vlad had no intention of bowing. He would rule through fear, through justice, and through the unshakable belief that Wallachia would never kneel again. And that belief would make him legendary. Stories of Vlad's rule spread quickly, tales of how he punished thieves, traitors, and invaders. The punishment was gruesome, but it was also symbolic. He used a single method that would make his name echo across continents: the stake. Enemies and criminals alike were impaled outside his castles, a warning to all who dared defy him. It was said that entire forests of stakes surrounded his strongholds, the wind carrying the whispers of the condemned. And while this image fueled horror in the West, among his own people, it inspired something else: safety. Under Vlad's rule, a golden cup could sit untouched in the middle of a marketplace, and no one would dare steal it. To Western Europe, he became a monster. To his people, he became a shield. He ruled with an iron hand, but in an age of chaos, perhaps that was the only way to survive. And then came the invasion that would seal his fate in history. The year was 1462. The Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, led an army of more than 100,000 men across the Danube, determined to crush Vlad and his defiance once and for all. But the prince did not flee. He struck first. On a dark June night, Vlad led a surprise attack on the Ottoman camp. What history calls the night attack? Dressed in black, He and his men moved like shadows through the enemy camp, killing thousands before vanishing back into the woods. The Sultan's army was thrown into chaos, haunted by stories that Vlad himself was a demon who could not die. When the Sultan advanced to the capital, he found something even more terrifying than the battle itself. A field of 20,000 impaled corpses, Turks, rebels, traitors, stretching for miles. The air was heavy with silence and death. Even the Sultan, it is said, was so horrified that he turned back saying, "How can you conquer a man who does this to his enemies?" From that moment on, Vlad was no longer just a ruler. He was a legend, a figure of terror and fascination, a man who would rather be feared by the world than forgotten by history. But legends are double-edged, and soon the same stories that made him famous would also be used to destroy him. Enemies spread tales of his cruelty, of rivers of blood, of a prince who drank from the skulls of his victims. Western pamphlets, written decades later, transformed him into something else, a creature beyond human. And from those dark exaggerations, the myth of Dracula was born. History can be cruel to memory, and for Vlad, the line between truth and myth began to fade almost as soon as his story left his homeland. In Western Europe, people didn't see a prince fighting for his people. They saw the devil himself. During the late 1400s, the printing press was spreading across Europe, and with it, stories. Tales of Vlad's punishments, his wars, and his terrifying rule spread like wildfire in pamphlets printed in Germany and Austria. These weren't official reports. They were horror stories, the medieval version of viral news. They told of a man who boiled his enemies alive, who dined among impaled bodies, and who drank blood from goblets. In truth, these were exaggerations, propaganda crafted by his political rivals. But to a Europe already terrified by wars, plagues, and superstition, it was the perfect monster story. In one account, they wrote that Vlad invited traitorous nobles to a feast, and after serving them food and wine, he ordered them all impaled. In another, they said he skewered entire armies and left them as a message to God. And whether those stories were true or not, they spread faster than any truth could. Imagine hearing of a man who lived among mountains cloaked in mist, ruling a land where crosses lined the roads and wolves howled through the night. To the Western mind, this was not just a king. It was something older, something supernatural. And so began the slow transformation of Vlad, the Prince of Wallachia, into Dracula, the Prince of Darkness. Centuries passed. The Ottoman Empire fell. Empires rose and vanished. But Vlad's legend never truly died. It slept like a ghost, waiting to be reborn. And then, in 1897, it found new life through the pen of an Irish writer named Bram Stoker. Stoker had never set foot in Transylvania. He learned of the region through maps, travelogues, and one curious book about the princes of Wallachia. In it, he found a name that caught his attention: Dracula, a name that meant son of the dragon, or in his imagination, the son of the devil. Stoker's novel Dracula was not a biography. It was a fantasy, a Gothic masterpiece about immortality, fear, and forbidden desire. But by borrowing the real name and a hint of the real history, he created something that felt ancient, believable, and terrifying. The fictional Count Dracula was not Vlad, but the shadow of Vlad lived inside him. A ruler who defied death, who lived in a fortress high above the valleys, who could not be conquered, who drank not wine, but blood. Readers were spellbound. Dracula became more than a novel. He became a symbol, a reflection of human fear, the fear of death, of darkness, of what lies beyond reason. And as the years passed, the line between the historical man and the fictional monster disappeared. Vlad the Impaler became Count Dracula in the world's imagination. And Transylvania, his homeland, became the kingdom of vampires. But here's the truth. The real Vlad never lived in the castle, now called Dracula's castle, Bran Castle, with its towers and misty cliffs, was chosen centuries later by filmmakers and tourists, not historians. The true stronghold of Vlad was Ponari, a ruined fortress high above the Arjak River. Hidden among jagged peaks, it's far less romantic and far more real. A fortress rebuilt by Vlad himself, stone by stone, after crushing a rebellion of boyars. It was there he ruled. It was there he watched the valleys burn when enemies approached. And it was there, perhaps, that the real man slowly became a legend. In Romania today, Vlad is remembered differently, not as a vampire, but as a ruler who stood against overwhelming odds. A man who fought empires, defended his faith, and demanded order in a lawless time. Some call him cruel, others call him just, but all agree he was unforgettable. The world may know him as Dracula, but in the valleys of Wallachia, he remains Vlad, a prince, a warrior, and perhaps the last man who dared to rule through fear. What do you think? Was Dracula truly a monster, or a misunderstood man shaped by a brutal world? Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Time and Secrets for more stories where history and mystery intertwine, where legends breathe again and truth waits to be discovered.